Whether on your daily commute or just passing through on a road trip, you've probably paid a highway toll at some point in your life. Have you ever wondered where all that toll money you've been paying is going? In many cases, it's going to a public entity, like a state or port authority, to pay for the maintenance of the toll road. Increasingly, however, your tolls are going to a private investment company who purchased the rights to operate it. This episode is the unlikely story of a public toll road sold to private interests for $1.8 billion, the story of the Chicago Skyway. The Chicago Skyway is an odd 7.8-mile stretch amongst the web of highways that take commuters in, out, and around Chicago on a daily basis. It connects the Indiana Toll Road to the Dan Ryan Expressway and provides a route for commuters from Indiana to head into downtown Chicago. There's only one toll plaza along the route, and all cars heading in both directions must pass by it before exiting. To understand why it's so amazing that the city sold the Skyway for $1.8 billion, we have to understand the history behind it. The city had been trying to get rid of the Skyway since nearly the time it was built, and it took them 50 years to do so. Why was the city trying to get rid of it? And why did they even build it in the first place? Well, the city of Chicago never wanted to build a highway there back in the 1950s, but the state of Indiana forced their hand. This was the era before the federal government built the interstate system we know today. In the early 50s, states built their own highways and had to work together to make sure they connected at state lines. Illinois and Indiana's governments were working together on a TriState Expressway that would connect the states on a route that went south of Gary, Indiana. At the same time, a separate Indiana Toll Commission was also building highways. The general understanding was their east-west toll road would join with the TriState Expressway just south of Gary. Instead, the Toll Road Commission secretly drew up plans that extended the Indiana Toll Road through the heart of Gary and all the way to the Illinois border, where traffic, thousands of cars from Gary, Toledo, and Detroit, would dump out onto city streets. Needless to say, Chicago city leaders were furious. At the time, traffic congestion was becoming a real problem, and a new highway at Chicago's doorstep dumping traffic onto its streets was not what it needed. The city council passed a resolution denouncing the highway alignment. Indiana toll road officials defended the plan, saying that this is where traffic wanted to go, and removing this section could jeopardize funding for the entire toll road. With the toll road boosters unwilling to back down, Chicago had to figure out how to cope with all of this new traffic. City leaders felt that building a highway that connected to this new, unwanted Indiana toll road was probably the best way to deal with a bad situation. The city asked the state to help pay for it, but the state was still planning on building that TriState Expressway and had no real interest in building another highway around Chicago. If the city wanted this highway, it would have to take the unprecedented step of building it itself. That's exactly what it did. It took the huge financial risk of building an expensive road with the hopes that toll revenue would cover the costs. The projections made by their engineering consultants made the project seem feasible. The toll road would be a convenient link to downtown Chicago and carry many toll-paying cars. So, in 1953, the city of Chicago opened the newly built Chicago Skyway. How did it go? Well, badly. It missed traffic projections from day one. You see, the city of Chicago didn't have the authority to build a toll road, but it could build a toll bridge. So the entire Skyway project was called a toll bridge project, with the centerpiece being a bridge over the Calumet River. The highways on either side were simply long bridge approaches. To make the argument that this was a toll bridge more convincing, all drivers had to cross the bridge, and the Skyway wasn't meant to serve local traffic. This lack of local traffic also negatively impacted traffic numbers. Within 5 years, it looked like Chicago wouldn't be able to make their debt payments on the Skyway. The city hoped traffic would increase once it connected to the Dan Ryan Expressway built in 1962. Now commuters could drive by interstate all the way to Chicago's downtown loop. In fact, the opposite happened, and traffic declined 4% on the Skyway after this connection was built. The city defaulted on the Skyway debt in 1963. Even worse, the TriState Expressway was extended to connect with the Indiana Toll Road east of Gary in 1964. Now drivers could take a slightly longer but free road a couple miles south of the Skyway. The Skyway was officially redundant. Chicago Mayor Richard J. Daley tried to unload the Skyway on the federal government a couple of times, in 1963 and again in 1972. He also tried pawning it off to the state government in 1973. All efforts were unsuccessful. By the 1970s, traffic was so low they couldn't afford regular maintenance. It was riddled with potholes. So how did the Skyway, a redundant, hole-filled waste of concrete, sell for $1.8 billion in 2005? Well, by the 1990s, the Chicago area had grown considerably, and so had traffic. There was finally enough commuters in the system to raise traffic levels on the Skyway and have it turn an annual profit from tolls. By 1997, the Skyway was generating $17 million a year in profits, even after maintenance and debt payments. Seemingly overnight, the toll road went from a burden to an asset. Mayor Richard M. Daley used the profits to fund his neighborhood infrastructure plans and improve city roads. Critics, primarily commuters from Indiana, argued that the tolls they were paying on the Skyway should only be high enough to pay for its maintenance and shouldn't be diverted away from it to pay for projects in Chicago. So while the Skyway was finally paying its way, the 1990s were also a time period that saw the rise of investment banks leasing toll roads and other types of public infrastructure like airports, ferries, and parking lots. These pieces of infrastructure proved lucrative. They were secure, long-term properties, often with a captive consumer base. Mayor Daley saw this trend and figured it might be worth it to give an investment firm a 99-year lease to operate the Skyway. That way he could get a huge cash windfall to solve many of Chicago's budget woes. The city could also get out of maintaining the Skyway. Sure, it was finally making the money, but there was political opposition to using that money for non-Skyway projects anyway. In 2005, Sintra McCrory, an Australian investment firm, bid $1.83 billion, almost twice the next highest bid, and the city accepted. City leaders were thrilled with this unexpectedly high windfall and used that money to pay off debt, pay for neighborhood facilities and social programs, and start a rainy day fund. So was the privatization of the Skyway a good deal? Well, it depends on your point of view. If you're the city of Chicago, it probably was a good deal. They never wanted to build that highway anyway. It was one of the last toll roads built in the United States thanks to the 1956 Federal Highway Act. This act gave states so much money to build highways that tolls were unnecessary. The Skyway was just ill-timed and ill-conceived. Sintra McCrory, the leaseholders, might not think it was such a good deal. Traffic declined in the Great Recession of 2008, and the Skyway wasn't making much money for them before that. They are actually now no longer the leaseholders thanks to a variety of mergers and acquisitions, and the new leaseholders have been more conservative in the management and operation of the Skyway. Today, the Skyway makes them a reasonable return. The real losers are the toll payers of the Skyway. One of the reasons the city could fetch such a large sum of money from the deal was because of the favorable terms regarding toll rates. The agreement allowed toll increase at the highest of three factors: 2% per year, an increase in the consumer price index, or an increase in the nominal gross domestic product per capita. They can raise tolls to the highest of these three, so basically a minimum of 2% per year. The private Skyway operators have used this very generous clause to raise tolls on cars from $2 in 2005 to $5 in 2017. If the economy grows at a rapid clip, toll payers could see double-digit tolls before they know it. The sad irony here is that some of the Skyway drivers didn't like excess toll revenue being diverted to pay for improvements to Chicago streets and neighborhoods. This is in part because many are Indiana residents commuting to Chicago. They just wanted lower tolls and didn't really care about Chicago neighborhoods. But now these same drivers are paying higher tolls than they would have otherwise, and the profits aren't going to help anybody but bankers and global investors. So that's the long and winding story of a short and straight toll road in Chicago. It was unwanted for nearly 50 years until suddenly it was worth a fortune. Its sale was one of the most notable in the era of privatization of public assets. Today, many toll roads around the world are operated privately, just like the Skyway. So next time you're paying your tolls, that money could be going to a state government, but it could also be going to a private investment firm. One of my favorite things about the Chicago Skyway was the McDonald's built randomly right in the middle of it. It recently closed due to poor sales. The owners said that more people stopped to go to the bathroom than to buy food. The Skyway operators recently demolished the McDonald's and have no plans to replace it.